Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bear Bar Tales. It is I, the one bear with enough dexterity to learn to play an instrument, then learn to work a computer and read, eventually bringing stories here for you fine folks, thus becoming the Bear Bard. If you like this kind of content, make sure to give this channel a sub. It will then justify all those keyboards I broke learning to type with pause. Today's story will be a bit different, as instead of a horror story, it follows one brave adventurer who learned from an earlier horror story to then avoid another potential horror story. It's good to see this young man not only learn from his horror story experience, but continue to reform from being a former edgelord. As this is a pseudo-sequel, I'll recap his earlier story. He was an edgelord who liked a girl in his campaign, and together they fought a sex-starved weeaboo. I believe he handled the situation better than he gave himself credit for, but not perfect. They griefed their fellow player instead of talking with them or their DMs about it, causing a lot of tension and awkwardness at the table. I'll have a link to both the original story, and after I started recording this video, I actually remembered that Den of the Drake read this story on his channel, so I'll link that below as well. Just remember to come back after you've listened to it. Now, onto today's story with the short title, an almost horror story that became a triumph story due to an ex-problem player actually learning his lesson and dealing with a D&D problem in a healthy manner. I actually got that all in one take. That's a surprise. This is a sort of pseudo-sequel to my horror story about the former edgelord, me, who got into a feud with a pervy weeaboo that almost derailed an online D&D campaign and almost ruined another player's fun. I'll link the story at the top here. I will say that this story has nothing to do with anyone in that story, nor is it a follow-up on Dave the pervy weeaboo, but more of a follow-up on my own actions and how I learned from them to avoid an almost similar situation. Previous story can be read here. So really consider this an almost RPG horror story that became a triumph story with a happy ending for everyone, and lesson in how problem players can change if they actually put the effort into change. Also, like my last tale, this one was like 12 to 13 years ago, so my memory isn't 100% on some things, and I filled in some minor blanks that I can't remember, but I do remember the important story beats. So this would be my first and only in-person Dungeons & Dragons campaign. Most of my TTRPG experience has been online due to convenience and most of my tabletop-aligned friends being online friends. This would be a big deal for me, especially after some reflection from my last D&D experience with my previous online campaign and the obnoxious edgelord character I had made for it, and the dumbass drama I had had a hand in during it. I wanted a fresh start to actually learn from my past mistakes, so this college D&D group was going to be my redemption arc, as anime fans would call it. I was a nerdy former problem player who was looking to get back into D&D with a fresh perspective. Between being an introvert who was, and in some ways still is, far more comfortable with being myself online than in real life, and wanting to avoid the cringy edgelord habits with my last character, created a rather bog-standard down-to-earth paladin character, which, funnily enough, would make him far more endearing to the table for reasons that will become clear soon. The cast in this game was as follows. Babysitter Paladin, my paladin character. He was the shell-shocked but still heroic-driven human former paladin of Bahamut, turned follower of Pelor, because sad backstory about his traumatic experience during a crusade-like conflict that left him with some haunting memories and severe crisis of faith, who was the party's de facto leader, in name only. Hilariously, he was treated more like an exasperated babysitter that nobody listened to due to the more outlandish personalities of the party. Despite his irritation with the other party's chaotic antics, he never despised anyone, save for one, but we'll get into that, and in general was sort of a big brother to the party that was respected for doing everything to keep them safe, even if they still loved messing with him. Hustler Warlock, a female tiefling warlock pretending to be a wizard because in-story persecution of warlocks, whose player acted her out as this sort of friendly witch snake oil salesman type character. She was good-natured and had a kind heart, but she was always about the hustle and making her coin purse full through harebrained potion schemes. Her occasional greed sometimes got the party into a number of dangerous encounters. Snart Cleric, a far more laid-back and chaotic holy woman compared to Paladin, and the team's healer. She was a human cleric rogue hybrid who, if I remember the story correctly, was a reformed crook turned cleric of a chaotic good god, but can't remember which. She was mostly cleric with some rogue abilities, specifically as far as stealth, picking locks, and persuasion/deception checks. This would come in handy since our party didn't have an actual rogue, She had a Robin Hood-like streak, so while she typically would still indulge in theft and pickpocketing, she was also careful to do it to assholes or just stuck-up noble types, which was fine with her chaotic good deity of choice. Chaotic Wizard, the bane of Paladin's existence. A mischievous and manic gnome wizard whose personality would best be described as the genie from Aladdin on crack cocaine. He was a flashy, demented, arcane agent of chaos who was always trying to be the center of attention, and rarely, if ever, thought plans through and just flew by the seat of his robes. 50% of the party's problems had a chance of being caused by his antics, and he and Paladin had a very sitcom antagonistic relationship in the game. And finally, the DM. A friendly and energetic guy who, by his own admission, hit the shrooms a little too much, who was one of my favorite DMs. He was fair and relaxed, never a rules Nazi, and his only concern was crafting a challenging but fun and fair campaign. His campaigns never felt boilerplate, nor did they feel like Dark Souls difficult. We all had a fun time with his campaign for as long as it lasted. For most of the campaign, we were mostly running from quest to quest, never really encountering what I thought would be considered the big plot quest. I think we came close to it near the time that the game sadly ended due to a lot of people not having time for the game. The party's dynamic was relatively fun and often full of hijinks, with my paladin more or less playing off everyone else as an exasperated straight man. I was constantly afraid I was playing paladin as a stick-in-the-mud / fun police guy, since in character, I sternly, but never do as I say harshly, tried to keep the party focused on quests and plot hooks. But DM commented that he actually enjoyed my pally, as he felt like I was keeping the more outlandish members of the party on task without full-on railroading the campaign. The other players felt the same, since they sometimes got lost in their own side quests and whims, and treat Pally as an annoying but well-meaning responsible older brother who helped them focus sometimes. For the most part, Paladin had an annoyed but amicable relationship with Cleric and Warlock, but became increasingly frustrated with Gnome Wizard. The fastest summary I could give would be Wizard was SpongeBob and Patrick to Paladin's Squidward. Paladin suggests they sneak around a kobold camp. Wizard would cast a firework-like cantrip to get their attention without consulting anybody. Paladin thinks a suspiciously placed treasure looks like a trap. Wizard would use mage hands to grab it and trigger a booby trap, forcing the party to flee immediately. Paladin was trying to get information for a quest from a dangerous, but at the time civil cult. Wizard was caught trying to break into their sanctum without consulting the party, again, and caused an all-out brawl with the paranoid cultists. Gonna talk briefly about the out-of-character stuff. I found both Wizard, the character, and his player irritating. He was a very manic extrovert to my more reserved and at the time depressed introvert. He had rather poor table manners as far as the snacks we'd all bring for the game night, and had zero volume control with his indoor voice, so he would often loudly or borderline shout what his actions were, or when acting out the wizard's antics, which constantly rubbed me the wrong way, along with how he played the wizard in general. However, this campaign happened several months after my last one, and the cringy feud I had with Dave, the sex pest player. Between the lessons I learned with that horror story and the added weight of being an in-person campaign, I did not want to repeat past mistakes. I talked to the DM privately about my annoyances about Wizard and his player, emphasizing that the last thing I wanted to do was to bring my issues into the game, which was seeping a bit with how Paladin could be shorter and more irritated with Wizard compared to the admittedly less destructive antics of Warlock and Cleric. I'll say that the DM was probably one of the best dungeon masters I have ever had the pleasure of playing with in all of my on and off TTRPG experience. He commented he appreciated me coming to him about it over raising a stink at the table, and being able to admit my issue with Wizard were superficial on some level and wanted to find options of dealing with it before it blew up into drama. He admitted that while he enjoyed the humorously chaotic nature of the party and my paladin's attempt at hurting them, like an underpaid daycare worker, DM found Wizard to sometimes go out of his way to hog the spotlight, and while he never indulged in what any of us would consider griefing, trying to intentionally get the party killed or intentionally derail the story, his refusal to ever consult the party about his actions or ever really reflect on how many close calls the party had because of him was becoming an issue. He told me he had an idea, but kept me out of the loop for both story and metagaming purposes. But just told me Wizard's antics were about to catch up with him, and that he and the party would need to make a difficult choice. Cue next session. A local lord our party had met in session 1 was sending guards to arrest Wizard for one of his many in-town antics. I can't recall what it was exactly that caused this, but it was basically one of his many zany actions that accidentally caused property damage and some endangerment of civilians that, at the time, the party just brushed off. The Lord gave Paladin, Warlock, and Cleric clemency despite him being a member of our party, For context, Wizard came in a few sessions after we started. So the Lord knew us as reliable adventurers before Wizard joined, but said Wizard would have to pay considerable damages or be imprisoned. In character, I was quite happy with letting Wizard reap what he sowed, but DM described a little gentle nudge from my deity Pelor, basically guilting me about never leaving my family behind, even if they were a pain in the ass. Reluctantly, Paladin and the party attempts to find a way to help Wizard, since they were on good terms with the Lord. Now, the Lord was a friendly NPC, but by no means a saint. He ran the city with an iron, but velvet-covered fist. He saw an opportunity with our predicament and offered a deal. He needed capable fighters for a Colosseum-like deathmatch against a ferocious beast to entertain the city's commoners, but had no takers for the big prize fight. All we had to do was agree to kill the beast for the city's entertainment. And not only would Wizard's crime be forgiven, but we'd get to keep all the considerable prize money, assuming we didn't die. However, he refused to reveal the beast as to not ruin the surprise. As we prepared for the battle, Wizard was a bit more somber about the events, thanking the team for taking up for him. Paladin briskly, but gently, comments that despite them cleaning up one of his many messes, none of them wanted him to rot in prison or worse. But comment his actions will eventually affect all of them, not just him. Wizard actually took this to heart, and while he said it was hard for him to control his manic impulses, he tried to reel them in for their sakes. So we get to the Colosseum, and the setup is as bombastic as you can imagine. The Lord, with his VIP box, introduces us as the brave volunteers, who would slay his recently acquired beast, or die trying. Then, we had a collective oh shit moment when the beast was rolled out and we realized why the Lord didn't have any takers for his match, because the beast in question was a white dragon. Now, looking back, I think the DM nerfed this thing to the ground, having some in-game explanation of it being young and slightly injured from its capture. Since, thinking on our levels at the time, I think 3 or 4, an actual stat-wise D&D dragon would have utterly wrecked us. Regardless of this, it was still an intense fight with a lot of close calls. I'll spare the play-by-play, but more or less, it was an uphill battle to fight this thing, with me doing what I could to get it to focus on my tanky ass over the super squishy parts. It ended in a bombastic way, with the DM describing the killing blow in vivid detail, with me and Wizard teaming up, him telling me to throw my sword at its chest and to trust him. I reluctantly agree, launching it like a spear at the white dragon, Wizard using his magic to cause the sword to burst into flames and pierce the dragon's heart, killing it. We're met with an uproarious applause for slaying the dragon, and we're all hyped at such an achievement. The Paladin and Wizard seem to be far more amicable after this life and death situation, until Paladin pulls out his sword to find out that the flashy attack basically destroyed it. Wizard sheepishly says that he'll help him get a better one, and Paladin, with an annoyed, but at this point I'm used to this crap resignation, just sighs and says he appreciates that. The Lord keeps his promise, with Wizard free of charges and us now considerably richer, and all of us more or less close as a chaotic but tight-knit party head out on a new side quest. Wizard's attempt to make amends by finding Paladin the best magical longsword money can buy, which in itself is a wild and zany adventure, but I think this is a good place to end the story. In general, that was the vibe with our party, until sadly college ramped up and we all didn't have time for D&D, and slowly drifted apart. While I'm not in contact with anyone from this campaign, I still fondly remember our zany adventures and how much I had grown as a person and player compared to my crappy actions in the last campaign. This was the full, honest and fun Dungeons & Dragons experience for me, and I hope all of my campaigns will be as fun and heartfelt as this one. TLDR, a reformed problem player joins a new campaign, gets irritated by a manic spotlight-hogging solo player who constantly got the party into trouble without ever considering them. And the ex-problem player does the responsible thing and consults the DM who crafts a perfect in-game situation to teach the manic solo player the consequences of his action while allowing the party to grow and become a healthier, close-knit unit. And scene. I actually love this story. I know it's not like this big, grand, crazy deal, but this is a story of what should happen. This is a dude that admits to being a problem player in his past, and instead of continuing to do that, just saying, oh, this is me, deal with it, stops and does what he should have done before, and turns the party around. You know, they went from being this chaotic, just about to blow up and end the campaign, to a great unit that he still misses here 12 to 13 years later. With this Wizard, we all have people in our lives that we know that grate on you even if they're not bad. So it's nice to give them a chance to turn themselves around and be better. We got to work with them. We're not always going to be able to just leave. Sometimes we work with them. Sometimes we live with them. So We have to know how to be able to handle and work around these people and with these people as opposed to just cutting out. And as it happened in this game, sometimes that can turn into something good. You can't just write these people off because they grate on you at the time. I really love how the DM handled it, how it brought them together naturally. A lot of times, the good answer is just to talk to people, but I love that he didn't even need to do that. This guy had the experience to just say, here, let me throw the situation, knowing his players well enough that it handled it. It worked. It's great. If you're a DM that you can do that, that's a pretty special thing. Not every situation can be handled like this, but it's good when it can be. And this really is the benefit of just talking, not just like internalizing it and finding ways to get back at the person, but just being an adult and working through the situation. Then you end up with a great campaign. But I think that's where I'm going to call it for the day. I want to thank you guys for supporting me. At the time of this video, we're actually up to 60 subs, which is awesome. I especially love that I'm seeing more comments in the videos. I love seeing what you guys think about the stories. Even if you would disagree with me, I love to see other people's opinions from the same material. I also started a Twitter if you're into that sort of thing. I've never really used one before, so we'll see how it goes. If you liked this video, I'd love for you to slap a paw down on that like and the subscribe buttons. I'd love to add you to our growing community. If you have a story you want me to read, you can submit it through either the Discord or subreddit. Links for both can be found below. For now though, this has been the Bear Bard, and I'll see you guys next time.